Welcome to Hey Sister. This is episode 35, Fast Friends. Hey sister.
Hey sister.
Join me, Courtney Lewis.
And me, Carly Ferguson.
In our conversational podcast about everyday situations.
You can count on us to tell it to you straight with our own sisterly spin.
Consider this a phone call with your own Southern sisters as we discuss with you personal accountability, healthy relationships, managing responsibilities, and contributing to society.
Each episode will consist of straight talk and a call to action.
Your sisters are calling.
Thanks for answering.
Welcome to Hey Sister. If you are new to our podcast, we welcome you to our sisterhood. Carly and I are your hosts for this conversational podcast, and this summer we're excited y'all are joining us for our Hot Topic series, where we are discussing life lessons that we feel are critical. These are topics that do come up regularly in our phone calls to one another throughout the week. We hope you feel like you're meeting up with us at a local drink shop and joining us in this sisterly conversation today. Our goal this summer is to keep these episodes short enough that you can finish them on the drive to your local splash pad or to a grocery pickup order if you're anything like Carly and I. We get it. Life is so busy, and we are so happy and grateful that you're carving out time for a sisterly chat with us today. And a little plug for the past 2 weeks, I want to share my own discovery. The last couple of weeks, we've had an episode about Fun Mom Summer. And then last week, we had our Man, I Feel Like a Woman episode. In both of those episodes, I feel like our goal was to be a fun mom in the first week of Hot Topics. And then the second week, we were talking about womanhood. And I actually had a rough day the day that we recorded that episode. And I was talking about how being a stay-at-home mom, that particular day was not my favorite thing. I had a little bit of a come to Jesus meeting, if you will. I had to have a little bit of a wake-up call and say, I really do need to feel a little bit happier about the situation I am in and feel like I want to be fun mom this summer. And in that episode, you heard Carly kind of give me a little bit of that sisterly kick in the pants, which is part of the purpose of this podcast, when she's like, in 10 years, you're going to look back and 10 years is going to have flown by so quick. So I was grateful for that perspective. But I also have to share another resource that I found that kind of goes along with Fun Mom Summer, and we will link it in the show notes. But I am somebody who gets overwhelmed sometimes with all of the options on Pinterest. And I wanted to find a resource that would help me have a fun mom summer, but also help me to feel a little less chaotic as a stay-at-home mom with all 4 of my kids home this summer. I guess I kind of got used to 2 of my kids being in school during the day. And so I really felt like I needed some more structure. But I have 4 little kids at home. And so I also need flexibility. I found a resource in my searching on Pinterest for something to do this summer that would help me keep a schedule, but keep it loose enough and yet still structured, that it would work for our family. So I'll share that link. But what it basically comes down to is every day of the week has a different theme. So there's Make It Monday, Take a Trip Tuesday, Water Wednesday, Thoughtful Thursday, and Fun Friday. And I love those 5 things because just those 5 categories helps me think, if I can do one thing that fits into each of those categories on Monday, okay, great. We did one science experiment, or we made a Lego because it's Make It Monday. On Tuesday, we took a trip, even if it's a trip to the grocery store. I'm just trying to make it more fun. It can be something fun. Anyway, I just appreciate some ideas there. And you can get totally overwhelmed when you get on Pinterest and look for creative ideas for a schedule. Oh my heavens, so many options. I got sucked into that black hole and I found myself looking at different entries and I was like, there's too many options here. And I quickly found myself starting to go into that phrase you've used before, Carly, analysis paralysis, where I was like thinking about all these different things. And is this schedule going to work? And no, why not? I ended up landing on one. And so I'll share that in the show notes because I ultimately just had to pick and choose and go. And I love what I found. And if it works for you, great. And it also has the option to fill in your time hour by hour. I'll share an example of what I've done and it works for us really well. So that's my way of blending those last 2 episodes together and growing personally, because we are trying to practice what we preach here. Speaking of what we share here, Carly, why don't you take it away and share what our topic is today for our hot topic?
Yeah. So Fast Friends, that's the title. And why are we talking about fast friends? As moms, we are craving some intellectual stimulation that is not just our kids barking orders at us to help them with this, do this. You want to have a conversation. So you're looking for friends that you can talk to. And I thought a lot about this because I am fascinated actually by the social interactions that we have with people I realized as I was like thinking back in high school, it was pretty easy to have friends because I would just go between groups. I didn't have one best friend. I was amongst all these different groups, which was great for me because I was able to be myself in these different situations with the band kids, with kids in DECA or in several of the different classes that I was in. And I got involved in those things. And that was easy for me to make friends because we had like interests. And then going on to college, you were making friends, but my experience in college was different because it was piecemeal together. Like I was getting the degree, but I wasn't involved in any kind of close-knit group.
I love hearing your experience because you and I have very opposite experiences for high school and college. So I'm fascinated by this. Continue.
And it's interesting because, within the same family, you can have different expressions. Like I am an extrovert, but I do have tendencies that are somewhat introverted. Like I need time to recluse away and my family would get on to me because I'd go up in my room and I'd read my books and I'd remove myself from a crowd. But I loved dances and a big event, and I could turn it on during that time and be making friends and then be depleted by the end of it. So these kinds of things, as we look back at our experiences in high school and in college, and now we're in motherhood, which is a completely different ballgame. You're learning all new rules. And I read this book, and I've mentioned it before in the episode with Hanalei Jean called Socializing, and the book is Captivate by Vanessa Edwards. So I enjoyed reading that or audibling it because it is fascinating to think about how when we speak with other people, how to captivate other people, which is what we all want to do, is to make a good impression, right? She does a good job about explaining in business situations, in party events, things like that, how you might go about making a good first impression and then continuing on that. So I would recommend it. Now, modifying it for the life of a mom or someone who has an irregular schedule, you're not really going to events and parties all that much. One could dream.
I get really excited for back to school nights and PTF meetings. That's my jam.
Really? I haven't been to any meetings like that. I feel like I would give the wrong first impression in those. And that's why I cringe because
you'll love them.
I am a knee-jerk know-it-all. I know it all pain.
There's a phrase we grew up with called KIAPIA. If you want to look it up, you can. We won't explain it, but it's a know-it-all pain.
Yeah. So I just have this tendency in meetings or in opportunities where there's a question asked that my hand goes up and I'm like, oh, darn, here I go. This is not the impression I'd want to make.
There's worse things.
Yeah, there are, but we have to be looking for those social sweet spots. This is what she calls them in her book. And she references places like the end of a buffet line so that once people get their food and they go to sit down, then you're positioned just far enough away that as they're looking, you could strike up a conversation, maybe sit together, not standing by the bathrooms, not standing at the beginning of the buffet line or like awkwardly just trying to make conversation as people are trying to pick their food, which we've all been in that situation, right? At a potluck, and you're like assessing what's there and you're making kids' plates, and it's just not the time for striking up a conversation. Mm-hmm. So knowing those things ahead of time, having a game plan can help you so much. But like I said, we're not in that zone that often. So for our lives, what might those be? And I thought about how that might be at a park. You might be near the swings, right? Because that's a stationary type place.
Yep.
And even if it's pretty short because the attention spans of our little ones are as little as they are, then you can talk to them. And then for at least for that brief moment, another place might be like the bottom of the slide, like near the slide. If you've got the toddlers that will wander and you have to stay close. If not, then you can sit on the bench and just make sure that there's enough space for somebody else to sit next to you. And then you need to think about those topics that you might want to go off of. And in this, I think the rules that we need to have for ourselves are just be yourself, right? Jeannie, so wise. But we need to be present in that moment. Sometimes we can, as you mentioned, the analysis paralysis, we think so much about what to talk about or oh man, are we so weird to want to get to know this other mom that looks really cool or this other lady that we have seen at church? Like going for it and asking a good question about them, any hobbies that they've gotten into. One that she uses is passion projects, which is interesting, but that's one that I would be like, oh, wow, let me think. It puts you in a mental space of I am a creative person. And even if you don't have anything, you're like, what could I do? So if you ask them a question, be prepared to listen as much as you can without, of course, having to take breaks to get the child.
Right.
Remember what they said so that you can bridge back into the conversation. And even if it's not in that same day, trying to remember their name is the first thing. So as soon as you can, introduce yourself first and ask them their name. And remembering their name is always like the first step. And I'm grateful for that because there's been times where I knew somebody else's name and they didn't know mine. And I was totally comfortable being like, hey, I know you, and saying their name and them looking at me and making them not feel bad for not knowing my name, but it creates a better situation for there to be a friendship that could bud from that.
Right. I find that that's important to try and remember somebody's name. And during the conversation, once they've said their name, I try and use it 2 times in that conversation.
Yes.
And that helps me a lot. I would really love to hear, what have you read in this book, or what are your opinions on being approachable or approaching other people who have their phones? Because like at the park, how common is it to see another mom at the park on her phone?
My personal opinion on it is just to leave them alone. Because I'll get on my phone because I'm ordering groceries or I'm doing something and the kids finally, I have like a moment to do that, or I'm responding to somebody's text. So they're not quite approachable.
Okay. So if somebody has their phone out, that's not the time to try and bridge the gap.
Yeah, that's my opinion. But if it's that specific situation, I would be wary about trying to talk to them because they're not mentally there to go back and forth. They might have that delayed reaction where you say something and then they say, wait, what? And you already feel like you're on the defense a little bit. And it could totally still be amazing, like as far as the conversation goes. And it might just be exactly what you need. And you need to feel it out like, hey, maybe that's what they needed that day. But I guess my first reaction would be to allow them that time. And then when you see them break from their phone, start gradually asking about their kids or how long they've lived in the area. Things like that are pretty easy to have conversations about. And it's okay to talk about your kids. I have to say that because sometimes we get into this headspace that talking about our kids makes us boring somehow, but that's what we're all living in, and be okay with talking about your kids. Now, don't take over the conversation and make sure to continue to ask questions. It should definitely be, if you're talking to somebody else, at least a 50-50, right? So you should be hearing them out much more. If you feel like you're taking more than 3 minutes, it must be something that you'd want to talk about for a while. Like it's a pretty in-depth conversation. But if you're just talking about how you couldn't find their socks and they're wearing mismatched socks and you can't believe that you haven't figured out a good sock system in order for them to, you might want to like reel it in a little bit on those things. Just try to come up with a bridge that you can think about for the next time. Also, a bridge that could make for another opportunity to see each other. Now, this is different depending on where you're meeting them. For instance, I just met some of Courtney's friends in Arizona, and they're just lovely women, and it was wonderful to meet them. I had a great time talking to them, but I know that it's going to be very rare that I'm going to be in Arizona. So you have to anticipate how much time you're going to be able to really devote to that kind of friendship. And it's totally fine to be fast friends that are there when we see each other and you remember each other's names.
Fast and fleeting friends.
Fast and fleeting friends. Yeah. And the connection's there and it builds you up, but like just be present in the moment and don't be thinking, oh no, like I'm never going to see him again. So like, why talk to them so much? It's still worth it in those moments because you can create good opportunities to just learn about them and it might help you in that moment.
I feel like we all need to return to our social skills, like 101. We've gone through this pandemic. And I feel like I'm a social person, but I feel like I am having to return to the basics because I find myself floundering on, oh my heavens, what do I say? I don't remember how to have a conversation. I end up talking about diapers. That's not what I want to talk about. Yeah. I think that it's like riding a bike. You got to practice a little bit. Or actually, it's not like riding a bike because riding a bike means it comes right back to you. I think this is more like...
No, it can. It does. Like it really does. And we need to have more confidence with ourselves and even what we're talking about. I've definitely been one to trail off because I'm like, that was stupid. And that's like more awkward than if I had just continued on my train of thought and finished it out and then maybe asked a question of them.
Carly, I'd love for you to share your experience when you were in Arizona. Please tell that story.
Yeah. So there are good times. I've had good experiences making friends, obviously, but I also have times where I say the wrong thing. And those are also really funny moments. And you can totally continue on and it doesn't have to be detrimental to friendships. So in this case, I was visiting Courtney and she has a great friend, Nicole, who is just so amazing. And if she's listening, I'm like, hi. We were talking about our kids having allergies and commiserating in that of like, what do you do when you don't know much about allergies? And I feel like that. I feel pretty undereducated with all allergy things. And so I'm learning as much as I can, but I just wasn't enjoying my experience with his allergy doctor. And we were talking about that and I was saying that kind of like I had less than great experiences talking to the allergy doctor and didn't inspire a whole lot of confidence in me. And then my son hit our 5-minute marker and he came out and was like needing me for something. And so I don't know why in that moment, I felt like I wanted to just make a really fast friend and maybe hit like a passion point, something that we're like maybe both passionate on. So I said, as I'm walking in, oh, but I don't really like trust doctors. And then she kind of like made like a smile, face. And I went in and I came back and we hadn't really had another opportunity to talk about that. And then that night, Courtney was talking to me and she said, oh, Nicole's like so wonderful. It's been so great that we've all been together again after COVID and everything's just back to normal. Like I've missed seeing these friends. And I was like, what? Because I thought back to that facial expression she made. And I was like, what does Nicole's husband do? And she said, oh, he's a doctor. Yeah. And I was like, okay, you find those moments where you're like foot in mouth. I could have said so many other things. That is not a defining trait of myself, right? Now, the next day, thankfully, Courtney had another opportunity for me to talk to Nicole and it was great. So it's not to say that means you just did yourself in and you're a social pariah. It's all going to be okay. Now, I've had good experiences too. Some of those have been, like I said before, knowing somebody's name. So I saw a mom in a workout class that I do that was leaving early from the workout class. And I just felt to ask one of the other women that knew her what her name was. So they said, she's Elisa. And I was like, okay, cool. I ended up seeing her at Hat Creek. There's the usual reference to Hat Creek again. I think I mention it in every single episode. And
you're 3 for 3.
If we could get them to sponsor us, that'd be wonderful. I would love that. Anywho, so I see her and I call out to her. And not only did she like not know me, but we're seeing each other with makeup on. And anytime you see a friend from like the gym or something in a different place with makeup on and different clothes, you already have to mentally figure out where they come from. And so she was like, oh, Carly. And we ended up talking. And then it was a super busy night that night. And she sat with us at our table because it was really hard to find a place. And we just hit it off. And it was so fun to talk to her. And turns out she lived in the same city as my husband. And so they could talk about that. It was a great opportunity for me to learn more about her. And she was so inspiring to me with the Bible study that she was involved in. And from that, we were able to be fast friends. And since then, it's been fun to get to know her better. And then you might have an event, maybe a church activity. It's really easy to stick to the people you know. And I think that is good to an extent. If there's a hostess, it's good to stand near the hostess because they can introduce you to people that you might not know yet. And so that might be a social sweet spot, is standing near the hostess. But otherwise, if you're going into an event and there's not really a clear host or person in charge, don't just stick to the people you know if you're really wanting to get to know other people. Go and sit at a different table. But Courtney, you're really good at introducing people. I was on the receiving end of that as we were in Arizona, and you were able to recount these really great traits about your friends that helped me to remember them. So could you talk a little bit about that and how you go about doing that?
I'd love to. Thanks for putting me on a pedestal there. I feel like that's actually something I'm trying to get better at, but I'm not perfect. And in fact, I can think of 2 or 3 examples recently where I've had those open mouth insert foot moments. And I'll share those just because I feel like those are good learning experiences for us, right? So I had two friends. I teach a free weekly workout class in my backyard, and it's free because it's also pretty low key. There's kids playing, sometimes things get interrupted. It's not super formal, but it's open to everyone that knows me and that lives locally to just come to my backyard and work out. And I had two different friends in one particular class show up that didn't know each other. One was a former student from a different facility where I used to teach, and another was a friend from church. And when I was introducing them to each other, which I am a strong believer in great introductions, but I completely forgot everything that matters to me when introducing people. And when I introduce them by their statistics, essentially, which is like one of the worst things you can do. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So I introduced one friend as, this is my friend who's a news anchor. She has such a cool career. And then I introduced my other friend as, this is my friend who has 7 kids. Isn't she awesome? And both of those things I am very wowed by. I think they're incredible women. And I love that one's a career mom that has a daughter, and then the other has 7 kids, 6 boys, and then finally a little girl. And so I'm introducing them, though, by those qualities that are not their defining characteristics, but things that I think are impressive, or things that I thought that somebody else would care to know about. But really maybe introducing the mom that has 7 kids to the mom of a daughter of 1. When I say that to her, she might think, do you think I'm less impressive because I only have 1 kid? Or maybe my friend who has 7 kids, when I introduce my other friend who has a career, she's like, oh, do you think I'm not very impressive because I don't have a career? So I want to make sure, and this is something that I've learned years ago, that when you introduce somebody, you introduce them with a compliment. And it's a twofold reason. One is that when you introduce somebody by complimenting them, that will help them know that you love them and why you love them. And 2, it actually makes a better impression on the person you're introducing them to. They're a lot more likely to remember this friend who gives the most thoughtful birthday gifts, or who does the most creative Halloween costumes for their whole family. If you can introduce somebody by a trait like that, that is a much better defining feature of somebody than their career choice, or than the number of kids that they have, or by what their husband's career is. One time I did that recently, and I was like, wow, that's pretty terrible. That I'm like, this is so-and-so, her husband does this. And I was like, oh my gosh, should I seriously just do that? And the reason I did it is because her husband is a national hero. And so I felt like I was justified in introducing her that way. But even still, I'm like, she is so much more than her husband's awesome wife. Why did I introduce her that way? So anyway, I feel like we can all have a lesson to learn there. And I would actually go as far to say is, let's make that our call to action this week, is think about, because you have to be proactive here. You have to think ahead of time how you would introduce a friend. If you were introducing 2 friends, make sure that you know what characteristics about each of them you would say in an introduction. In a situation where you're the person who's introducing them, you want to know what you would say. So like I said, for my examples, this person gave me the most thoughtful birthday gift this year. They gave me a brand of nail polish that I'd never heard of before, and now I don't use anything else. Just something simple like that. And that way it's also a conversation starter too, because then if you have to walk away from a conversation, they're like, oh, tell me about this nail polish. Or, oh, what was your most recent family Halloween costume? It gives them an opportunity to continue the conversation without you being there. And it also makes your friend feel super valued. So I'm a big believer in introductions. I would say that our call to action this week is to think about how you would introduce your friends. And even right now, picture 2 friends that you have from 2 different social circles, whether it be school or church or sports, whatever the entity is. Think about 2 different friends that don't know each other. And if you were to be in a room with those 2 friends, picture them in your mind. How would you introduce them? That's your call to action. Think about how you would introduce those 2 friends. And you can pick any 2 friends, but this is just a exercise to get your brain thinking and being a little bit creative, because you're going to have to think outside of the box, because it's going to be your natural instinct to be like, my kid does soccer with her son. That's the natural instinct. Think a little bit deeper. Try and peel back a couple layers. What has stood out about that person in your life, and how have you 2 been connected? Try and find those connection points. I think that will help you to really deepen those friendships. And it'll also be a great conversation starter to help other people make fast friends, because we really do want to make our friends' friends, our friends, and it'll help us grow. Carly, any other further thoughts about this topic?
I love what you said. I think being a connector is one of the best positions to be in, because then you create that bridge, a friendship from your friends to a new friend. And that is the real network that we're striving for in this day and age, right?
And especially because we're all sisters, right?
Mm-hmm.
No offense if you've ever said this, but if we hear women who are like, oh, I don't have girlfriends, I just have guy friends, like, come on, have girlfriends. Girlfriends are some of the best friends that you can have on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, don't be so quick to write off women and say, oh, I'm just friends with guys. I don't make girlfriends. Don't be that person. There are so many wonderful women out there, and you are just completely writing off a whole class of people that, by the way, you are a part of. So make some girlfriends and be a connector, like Carly said. As a concluding thought, do remember that you can check out our show notes for any resources that we've referenced in today's episode, as well as links to our social media accounts, which you can find us on Instagram at the Hey Sister Podcast or on Facebook at facebook.com/Hey Sister Podcast. As a reminder, the call to action is to think about how you would introduce two friends from different social circles. And we invite you to leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts if that's where you happen to be listening to us today. We always love your 5-star reviews, and we read every written review and we appreciate them. And we consider you our fast friends when you write us a review. So thank you. We already consider you our sisters, but when you leave us a review, that definitely makes us feel all the more bonded to you. So thank you, sisters. Thanks for joining us today, as always. And we look forward to talking with y'all next week. Bye-bye. We hope you feel like you're meeting up with us at a local drink shop and joining us in this sisterly conversation today. I have to tell you, my favorite personal drink this summer is a Diet Coke with cranberry from Sonic. Carly, what is your drink of choice right now?
I love also Sonic drinks, but I switch back and forth between the cherry limeade, which is just great, and having water with some lemon in it, which is less exciting, but necessary.
Awesome.
Caught me off guard there.
Sorry.
It's like, whoo, what is my favorite drink?